Thank you very much, ma'am. For anyone who knows the anxiety of a racer, that is the best introduction ever. Good afternoon to each and every one of you, heads of the private sector, members of the chamber. Forgive me if I single out the chairman and general secretary of my own party, Mr. George Payne and Dr. Jerome Walcott, members of parliament, and of course our new Canadian High Commissioner, who we're very happy to have you here this afternoon. Friends, I welcome being here because I treasure the collegial, thank you, I treasure the collegial ambience of these lunch sessions where absolute frankness and dignified Barbadian civility go hand in hand. In truth, I wish we could transfer that spirit to another place where I am duty-bound to spend many a Tuesday. Last year, you will recall that I spoke for 4 minutes, and I left the rest of the time to take questions from you. Before you start bolting for the door, let me assure you that I do not intend to roll over the minutes not taken last year into this year. But admittedly, there's a lot that can be said about the perilous state of our nation at this stage. You in the business community are already acutely aware of our present reality. I've said it before so many times. Our message has been consistent. Indeed, we have said that our predictions, and we don't take any comfort from this, have been alarmingly accurate. It doesn't give us any satisfaction. But from my interactions with you and with the society at large, I now know that Barbadians fully appreciate the mess that we are in, and indeed who has led us to this sorry pass. They're also aware of the urgent need for change and mindful of the civic responsibility that they have as citizens to bring this about. So in this 50th year of our independence, indeed 1 week shy exactly of the 50th anniversary, I will try today to focus on the promise, not the peril, on what should be and not what could have been or not what ought to have been. Astute and responsible leadership used to be the hallmark of our sovereign nation throughout most of our development journey. It can be so again. The present aberration has all but run its course. So let us turn our minds and our energy collectively to what must be done to get Barbados back on track. There are many who may be breathing a sigh of relief that it is not politics as usual in this speech or today. For the purposes of this analysis, I will structure my remarks on the theme, Rebuilding Investor Confidence in Brand Barbados. I interpret the term investor in the broadest possible sense to encompass primarily those in the local business community and those supplying money from outside. But it also includes every single Barbadian resident. In both tangible and intangible ways, we are all investors in our country's future. It is confidence in our own self-worth, our resilience, and our capacity to make Barbados better that in turn creates the conditions of trust and certainty which cause others to bank on us. And what has been the Barbados brand? Elements you have spoken about. In essence, it has been reflected as the core values that have defined us as a reliable partner in the international community, a moderate, responsible, small state guided by democratic governance, respect for the rule of law, human rights, and a functioning court system. A country characterized by political stability. Sound administrative and financial management was something we were known for. An efficient bureaucracy, an absence of corruption, well-developed physical infrastructure, progressive social and economic policies which emphasize the development of putting people first, and indeed a thriving social partnership between government, labor, and the private sector. In short, a safe, friendly, high-quality environment in which to live, do business, or visit. Or, in 2 words, a country that has hitherto been regarded for its stability and its fairness. Whether the business community here wishes to admit it openly or not, you all know, as well as I do, that because of the ill-advised policies of this government, the unfortunate political tribalism that the country has been subjected to, and the incompetence generally, confidence has been undermined both internally and externally. Trust eroded. The integrity of the Barbados brand has regrettably been tarnished. And as long as apprehension and uncertainty persists in our midst, erosion of it will continue. Without confidence, investment will always falter. So what then are the remedies to dig ourselves out of this seemingly bottomless pit and restore confidence in our future? How will we return growth to our economy? Let me say at the outset that I do believe that it is possible for us to rise as a country again. Will it be difficult? Yes, it will be. Will it be overnight? No, it will not be. We have allowed our circumstances to deteriorate for simply too long. And it is one thing to restore growth to our country when it involves fixing poorly performing productive sectors. But it is another thing, as we realize from as far back as 2013, when our economic decline is now being triggered by institutional implosion and social decay. That gives us a far more challenging task, and one that will require absolute discipline, commitment to the mission, creativity, compassion, and a willingness to listen and involve all who are prepared to help put their shoulders to the wheel. It is a gigantic task ahead of us. And what is it specifically that we must do to prioritize and restore investor confidence in a faltering brand Barbados? We have to begin by acknowledging that much of our present dilemma results from the absence of 2 vital attributes. Firstly, bold focus and decisive leadership, and secondly, sound, transparent, accountable, and disciplined governance. These attributes have been at the core, my friends, of all governments of Barbados since the introduction of universal adult suffrage 65 years ago, with the exception, regrettably, of this current administration. And I take no pleasure in saying it because we are all the victims of that poor performance. I give you the commitment today that the Barbados Labour Party government will return that to the fore. And the truth is that we recognize that this government continues to rob the future of and dreams of our people. And therefore, we have a higher than ordinary responsibility to be able to ensure that we can return this country to the middle, not to a tribalist pathway, to the middle where all Barbadians can prosper. Time does not permit me today to be exhaustive, but I do know that whatever time remains between now and the dissolution of Parliament 16 months from now, we will continue to come to you sector by sector, presenting discussion papers, identifying how we will chart bold new courses in order to transform Barbados so that we can be the best that we can be, and so that we allow and make Barbados work for Barbadians again. So what must we do without delay? Because I too am conscious of your time today. 1, we must address our fiscal governance immediately by stemming its hemorrhaging. 2, we must stimulate and facilitate growth in our economy. 3, we must make it easier for Bajans to do business, whether as citizens or business people. 4, we must root out corruption, an alarming new feature of this government's operations and our country's landscape. 5, we must strengthen our key institutions and deepen the involvement of our people in decision-making. Today I will address these fundamental questions of how we as a party will treat to the role of government, essentially therefore, and the need for a new governance. For this is the fundamental difference between the Barbados Labour Party and the Democratic Labour Party, how we address these issues. Let me deal with the first one, fiscal governance. The last 7 years has shown that if we don't get this right, we are in trouble. Government will not have the freedom to deliver the social services, to provide the infrastructure, to protect our people, or to spur growth in this economy. This is our biggest challenge for the last 7 years. And it affects our stability and our way of life. You know what, and Ryan, I thank you for that document. What was a rare occurrence between 1955 and 2007 is now the norm between 2008 and today, that we continue to spend more on a recurrent basis than we earn. It is madness, fiscal madness. Our economy is smaller today in 2016 than it was, in 2007. When we consider that Barbadians have been at the front line of this government's adjustment, many of you and your friends and family and employees bearing the heavy taxation, losing your jobs, enduring without salary increases for almost 8-9 years, suffering reductions in your wealth, there is clear evidence that the sacrifices have been almost in vain. And why do I say so? Our government's deficit today remains unacceptably high. Our debt has doubled since 2008. And our foreign reserves today are still at their almost lowest level for 20 years. And scandalously, the services on which you depend are at their worst ever, from water to garbage collection to public transport to health to schools. Who has benefited in Barbados from the sacrifice? It surely is not the people of Barbados. It is not the business community as a whole. It might be those who govern, and it might be a privileged few who are favored by the government. But to this we add the regrettable fact that we've had 17 downgrades in this country. And this makes it more difficult, as you know, to access money and more expensive, not just for government, but for our domestic companies. And it forces, regrettably, your companies to make difficult decisions to protect your shareholders, as we have seen with Sagicor, which has recently indicated the own success that they've had in redomiciling to Bermuda, the oldest company that Barbados has had. But the rating agencies tell us on each occasion what will trigger upgrades and downgrades. So this is not a blind course. So that while the government of Barbados continues to fiddle from downgrade to downgrade to downgrade, Jamaica acts with discipline and resolve. And 2 nights ago, Moody's announced that Jamaica was being recognized for its efforts, and it was upgrading them from CAA2 to B3. That is the difference. The same way, my friends, therefore, that a journey of 1 million miles starts with the first step, the ability to manage our resources prudently, billions of dollars, starts with the first dollar. A Barbados Labour Party government, should it be the will of the people, will therefore be focused on these following things in relation to fiscal governance. 1, that we must sharply reduce with a view to eliminating the central bank's printing of money. If we could eliminate it one time overnight, that would be great, but that is not realistic. We have to sharply reduce it. This unprecedented level of recklessness in our monetary governance represents a clear and present danger to the stability of the Barbados dollar. We need to run our affairs in a way that the central bank is not the only or the first buyer of government bonds with printed cash. Because in essence, it is a devaluation of our currency by stealth. 2, we must return Barbados' credit rating to investment grade as key objective in the shortest possible time frame. This is an important and strategic necessity, not just for pride, but given the reliance of our government and our domestic companies on accessing capital internationally, it is the only way that we will be able to have access to affordable rates of interest to build back out our economy. And once again, I point to the benefits of Sagicor so moving and to the benefits of Jamaica's upgrade. 3, we must concentrate on growth to resuscitate government's sluggish revenues. Let me repeat this. The Barbados economy, as I said, is smaller today than it was in 2007. And that is the reason we continue to appear to have a revenue problem in this country. It is not because of the taxes, it's because the base is smaller. And the paradox is that it is this government's policy of excessive taxation that has largely contributed to a smaller economy. We are confident that with the right policies, a Barbados Labour Party government will achieve growth and government's revenue will rebound. Let me remind you that for every $100 million in growth nominally, the government takes $26 million of that in revenue. So when our economy is nominally smaller today than it was in 2007, you begin to understand why government's revenue has been performing as poorly as it has been. I make you as well a solemn promise today that we will not introduce taxes in budget speeches and then try to figure out how they're going to work. We will not. This cavalier approach affects business confidence at all levels. And businesses and individuals, you know better than me, have to be able to plan out your affairs. So you should not be hijacked into having to restructure your business operations to simply comply with an ill-conceived tax, as is happening now with the National Social Responsibility Tax, which government departments themselves cannot comply with in the manner in which BRA has asked them to. Similarly, I want to tell you that we will manage the system of tax refunds and set-offs more efficiently, as this is a critical issue to restore confidence in our business in this country. This administration regrettably needs to be reminded that cash flow management is critical to many of you, and that in truth and in fact, it is bringing you to the point where you have to have discussions about solvency in some businesses. And government, as the principal debtor, a form of adverse financing, I'm told it is now called, has a duty to act responsibly. The last point that I wish to make on the revenue issues is that all of this must go against the background of a Barbados Revenue Agency that is more responsive and attentive to the needs of its clients. That is the only way we will get through, not through adversarial positions. Fourthly, the one thing that a government has control over, Clyde, you say it all the time, is its expenditure. Government doesn't control its revenue, it hopes for revenue, but it controls its expenditure. And that is why I can say with confidence that we will be disciplined in this regard. We will make the hard choices that prioritize the country's needs because we don't have a choice. And how will we do it? We will determine what is essential, what is highly desirable, and what is optional. If we do not have enough to cover what we believe must be fully delivered to the Barbadian public as services, then there are other powers of government that we will have to press into service. And the truth is that our priorities will require us to have a laser-like approach on the core services that this country is now suffering from a lack of delivery of. And at the same time, the ability to spur growth within key productive sectors. Because unless we grow our way out of this problem, we will remain mired deep into the earth. We will also clinically remove, and we have to do it, the wastage through the systemic inefficiencies, the duplications of programs, the poor management practices. And this is not unique to government. This happens in any institution where there has not been comprehensive review on an ongoing basis. I say to you that we will not shirk from these responsibilities, for this country's very stability is at stake and our very way of life. And how will we move to facilitate and spur growth? The truth is, there are other powers of government. We've had an excessive reliance in the last 50 years on tax and spend. That's what we know best. But we've never creatively or sufficiently used the other powers such as legislation, facilitation, regulation, empowerment, and investment. Because growth comes not from government's actions, or from government's performance, I should say, but from the performance of businesses and the household sectors. So what is the real benefit here of using these other powers? That in very many instances, it will not add significantly to the deficit in a way that a simple tax and spend policy would do. That we can facilitate, we can legislate, we create the room to act in partnership with you and other players locally, internationally, be it in the NGO sector or predominantly the private sector. So how will we treat the legislation? And I'm not intending to be exhaustive today, but I give you 2 or 3 examples under each topic so that you appreciate the realness of what we are proposing. Barbados, for example, needs safe new financial instruments to incentivize Barbadians to use their savings to help finance both private and public sector development. At the moment, people get 35 cents for every $100 in interest every year. Some 20 cents for every $100 in interest. It is a paltry rate of interest as a result of the liberalization by the central bank of the minimum deposit rates. At the same time, there is a lot of liquidity still in the sector. And in some instances, banks are lending below what they would otherwise wish to be lending, but they must ask or answer whether they too have the confidence in this environment. By creating these new instruments through legislative mechanisms and to ensure protection, we will help foster a vibrant entrepreneurship culture, that there will be a win-win for all concerned. And if I may pause, there may be projects that members in here may want to execute, some even with government, as a result of government. And if you can carry along some of the rest of Barbadians through having bonds or other instruments to allow their savings to be utilized to help finance you at a lower rate of interest than what the traditional banks are lending you, but at a higher savings rate than what you're otherwise getting for your savings, it is a win-win situation. But we recognize we need the legislation to appropriately ensure that those who need to be protected are protected and that the level of regulation is light but not heavy. 2, we need to introduce a framework for reverse mortgages. There are too many elderly Barbadians who, if given access to capital now, will spend it on 2 key areas. 1, improvement in their housing, and 2, in their health. And in both instances, there will be an impact in economic activity in the country. 3, and I've said this to you in here before, and I'm sticking to it until we are given the chance. We can facilitate through legislation the reclamation of 2,000 acres of land as peninsulas and islands without adding a single cent to the public debt of this country. And we can do so by ensuring that those opportunities are given fairly across the board, but they will obviously always be subject to the appropriate environmental and social impact studies being done as a matter of urgency. There are few tourism greenfield spaces left to build out this economy. And what about our powers of empowerment? We all know about PPPs, public-private partnerships, and the truth is we are going to need to have a deeper use and a greater use of them given the limited fiscal space of government and given the circumstances that we still need to build out this economy. But in so doing, we need to create a proper framework for it and to ensure that fairness attends its practices as opposed to the Cahill type PPPs that we've seen in recent times. Accordingly, we will also work with you. We need you. And we need you to help build back this country so that we will work with you to identify clear areas of priorities where you believe that these PPPs can work and where they can work to the advantage of not just a few, but to the majority of people within the business sector in this country to add additional capacity to the Barbados economy. Last Friday, in addressing BAMP, I addressed this in the context of how we would partner with those within the health sector to add additional capacity because they are among some of the most entrepreneurial of the professional classes. And Barbados must establish itself by leveraging its strengths into an education and health hub for the Americas. It allows us to do the right thing for our people while having a significant economic return from those sectors as productive sectors in the future. We're also committed to introducing clear and transparent policies to facilitate the development of both renewable energy and clear fuels like natural gas. The generation of electricity in Barbados will be predominantly from these two sources in the future. And this will reduce the price of electricity. It will create jobs and it will save us valuable foreign exchange. It is a strategic objective to which we cannot take off our eyes. And if this policy starts with the two largest customers, Government of Barbados and the Barbados Light and Power, it then becomes possible for us to set a goal of universal access, a target of universal access to these two sources of energy, renewable and clean energy, for the majority of our population so that we can systematically bring down that which we spend in foreign reserves now on fossil fuels over the next decade. The truth is that renewable energy is limitless, and natural gas will have to be imported beyond our local capacity to supply. But I'm told that the Barbados Light and Power already has a pipeline from St. Lucie to Spring Garden to facilitate that natural gas expansion already, even though it has not happened. What is important for you is that these are bankable financial projects in which the private sector can easily partner with, for example, the National Petroleum Corporation or the Transport Board for the conversion, for example, of all of our buses to clean energy. Further incentivization by government can allow for an increase in electric and hybrid vehicles, an increase in the penetration levels, though it may be difficult to believe still, of the solar water industry, and for private and commercial conversion to renewable energy sources. And this for us is not a 2030 plan. This is an immediate plan, because how we utilize and deal with energy and technology will be critical to being able to turn this economy around in terms of growth. We will also ensure that we will earmark a part of government's procurement and government's assets to assist in reintegrating persons who have either lost their jobs in government or key contracts with government where that was the majority of income upon which that contract provider relied upon. And if these adjustments were made to help this country restore macroeconomic stability, then we must be prepared to help earmark opportunities for these people so that they can live still in this country. And on the issue of divestment, we need a mature discussion in Barbados on divestment. It cannot be done by stealth. There must be consultation, and this government must be told that divestment must not be used to consolidate wealth and power nor monopolies. Clearly, the manner in which the Barbados National Terminals Companies Limited divestment is continuing is unacceptable. And the fact that the government has been forced to, or not forced, has accepted $100 million on payment before the Fair Trading Commission can sign off on the transaction is a matter to which this government owes the people of this country an explanation. My party was founded on the principles of economic enfranchisement and empowerment. And Barbadians, we believe firmly, must not only own a piece of the rock, but they must be entitled to have a piece of the action. It seems that a lot in here don't want a piece of the action. But I know that the ones outside do. Regulation. Regulation has an impact on all businesses. It can aid profits or it can reduce them. It's necessary to protect and to ensure fairness. Truth be told, a sound, well-regulated jurisdiction breeds confidence and attracts investment. In contrast, a slow, cumbersome, and volatile regulatory environment, sounds too familiar, increases risk and reduces confidence. The Barbados Labour Party will commit in government to the review of all regulations in Barbados within the first 2 years of being in office to ensure that they are proportionate to risk, that they are fair, and that they do not create undue obstacles for people and businesses to overcome. You cannot just sit on decades-old regulations and believe that they are appropriate for the environment within which we are functioning today. And when I come to facilitation, you'll understand what I mean clearer. We will specifically identify the public interest, identify the public mischief to be avoided, and we will determine how best we can execute that level of regulation given the technology that is available to us today. Most people don't even remember that most of our regulatory legislation is in fact decades old today. The enforcement, however, of the regulations must also be done in a transparent and efficient manner, because this must always be one of the hallmarks of our economy and not the gas for corruption. Investment. The state still has an entrepreneurial role to play in the private economy in developing countries. And there are times when we will have to lead the way in sectors where there's little appetite in the private sector to invest their own capital. Indeed, this same hotel here was an initial example of it. But I do believe that times have gone on and that we have to be a little more creative in pooling risk, particularly in how we treat the financing opportunities with the private sector. I regret, for example, that the government has chosen to invest all $80 million of the equity needed for the Sam Lords investment, because I do believe that were there a little more creative, opportunities could have been had for pension funds, credit unions, individual investors, etc. That is, of course, on the basis that there was a true financial return to be had for the investment. Even Four Seasons had private investors. Facilitation. Facilitation ranges from a government being proactive to creating avenues for enterprise to the ease of doing business. And in this regard, we will commit to a clear charter for the turnaround time of decisions in government that businesses are dependent upon. You have to. It simply takes too long for ministries to respond to legitimate requests by businesses in this country. And I'm going to address the second part of it, the facilitation under making it easier for Barbadians to do business, because the truth, it is not only you as businessmen who find it hard to do business in this country, but the average Bajan finds it hard to do business in this country. And perhaps the most potent example of it is going to get a driver's license renewed. Going to get a passport renewed. Being told that you must now produce a new birth certificate for something that they have already, in law, given you a clear passport on showing that they have accepted that you were entitled, and hence the very act of asking you for a new birth certificate suggests that they may in fact have acted inappropriately in the first place and you're having a passport. So whether it is town planning, whether it is immigration, whether it is police accident reports, whether it is licenses, whatever it is, we have to take them one by one by one by one, whether it is in the form of the regulations that I've committed earlier for us reviewing in the first 2 years, or whether it is in the delivery of services. We must make it easier for Barbadians to do business. Similarly, Barbadians must be able to pay, if they want, their taxes and fees and fill out forms online. There's no need for you to be leaving your business to go and stand up in lines that keep you there for an hour or two when you can do almost anything else internationally online. It is unacceptable. But more importantly, in the last 15 or so years, we have produced too many of our graduates competent in the field of information technology to be able to assist us in making this transition to e-governance that is so necessary. But let me also remind you that it's not just about the systems. It's also about the culture. And we have a number of workers who will be on the front line of these systems. We have to address, and we will as a government, the anxiety that many of these workers will naturally have whenever change is imminent. But at the same time, we will also let them know that they are a critical cog in growing our economy, and that we will hold persons accountable, but we as a government will be prepared to share the bounty generated from improvements in our efficiency in these systems and in our competitiveness with these frontline workers who are helping us make this transition to a new experience. It is a shared mission. And if we are going to give everyone a vested interest in making this transition, we have to work cooperatively. And finally, let me deal on this issue of making business easy with the ease of doing business report. Benchmarking is absolutely important. We are now number 119 in the world. Now, the only time 119 sound good is if you're playing cricket at Kensington. This is totally unacceptable. And once again, the loss of confidence is a contributing factor. We were once motivated, my friends, and determined to be among the best in the world. We felt good when you could push out your collar and talk about Gary Sobers. There's a culture of excellence that used to be associated with our aspirations in this country. I say to you today, and I'm being cautious in the targets that I set, that I believe that within 5 years, Barbados can once again be the leading Caribbean country in the ease of doing business report. And within 5 years thereafter, that we can be among the top 20 countries in the world. But I like to underestimate and to over-deliver. Remember this day. Indeed, the truth is, we don't have a choice. Without the protection of preferences and the ability to provide incentives to attract FDI, our only way forward is to be the best that we can be as the platform for our competitiveness. And where do we start? We start with a school system that was adjudged as recent as last weekend by Business Insider at number 9 in the world, and we know it is not where it needs to be. So imagine when we start to improve, and imagine when we start to talk with people, and imagine when we start to have clear shared missions, because the most powerful 3 words in this country is we is we. And that is why I continue to believe, and I talk about it later, that productivity is not simply about a quantitative measurement in this country. It is first and foremost a cultural issue by getting people to understand that I respect you and you respect me, and we got a shared objective, and this is how we're going to do it together. But if we continue to have paternalistic or hierarchical structures that treat the people in an absence of respect and don't identify the shared missions, we're not going to get out of these holes. I believe, therefore, that in order for us to bring these targets that I have set and to make them a reality, that we need to make sure that the coordination for the ease of doing business and the removal of all these things must rest in the Prime Minister's office in order to ensure that it is not subject to the ministerial silos that otherwise negatively affect our ability to bring about reform in many of these departments and these services. This is too vital. We have to stop talking about it, and we have to do like Nike, just do it. Corruption. Corruption. What am I going to tell you? A Barbados Labour Party government will tackle it head on. But you know, and I know, and all of us in here know, it takes two hands to clap. This don't make no noise. None. And therefore this cannot be about a government taking on corruption alone, but has to be about a nation taking on corruption in high and low places. We will provide the mechanisms to ensure full transparency and accountability in the decisions of governments and the statutory corporations and the companies. But the truth is that you have a role to play. And too many people are prepared to whisper about corruption in this country, but nobody is prepared to stand up and be counted. But in the event that people are, we will establish an independent standing commission on corruption to provide a continuous and dedicated focus on ridding the country of this cancer. Because this is one cancer we cannot survive. This, together with campaign financing reform, will go a long way to removing the fuel for corruption in our landscape. There will be no further references to my pen does not have enough ink. Or are we talking about flying fish or dolphins? I have nothing more to say on that topic. In respect of the public service, very often when it comes to specialized skills, there is a limited pool of available specialized expertise. And this has had the untoward consequence of depriving us of significant revenue, or in worst case scenarios, seeing projects collapse. Lack of expertise can lead to bad decision making. Lack of supervisory capacity gives scope, regrettably, for corruption and fraud. A Barbados Labour Party government will establish a college of negotiators to negotiate on behalf of our government, our country, to protect the public interest while always ensuring a fair return to investors. And for those who believe that it is beyond us to do, the only reason we got in and out of the arbitration with Trinidad in time and within a defined budget is because we chose to bring onto our team the best available skills that there were in the world. Why do we now want to move away from bringing the best available skills in the country, or if there's a shortage in the country, globally, to help us define what is best for our government in terms of the public interest? We will also pass legislation, and this will be breaking new ground, to incentivize any Barbadian who identifies viable projects that are in the interest of the country and that actually come to fruition. You in the banking sector and the private sector have arrangers fees and facilitation fees. And what we have in the country is a clash between a corporate culture and a public sector culture? Well, the best way for us to deal with this is to make it transparent and pass legislation that allows anybody who achieves these things by making the project actually happen to the benefit of the country to be incentivized. We trust that this will reduce the scope for influence peddling, but it will also make every Barbadian who wants to be a potential investment ambassador and a builder of this nation. It will be a process that will have to be managed by a structure independent of the political class, but it will encourage creativity, innovation, and implementation. And it should not matter whether the source of the ideas, ma'am, is from the Chamber or from Chimborazo, from Biba or BlackRock. It will be a fair, transparent platform for all Barbadians. So, we will set the tone for accountability. And on this, I give you the solemn pledge that I will always lead from in front. In respect of our institutions, we need to reinvigorate the social partnership. And we need to include civil society as part of it, because we have to start addressing some key national priorities through the social partnership that have bedeviled us for decades or more. I referred to the productivity issue just now. We can talk about the PSVs, we can talk about illegal dumping, a whole host of things. And Cabinet's agenda has to be systematically restructured to start dealing with some of these issues rather than only being driven by what is important to ministries. We cannot get lost in the mire of ministerial republics, because what gets measured gets done. In the same way, Cabinet's agenda will be reformed to be able to appropriately track the execution of all major capital, public and private sector projects. Because it is only in the execution. How tired are you of hearing about this hotel and this project and that project for the last 2-3 years without seeing? It is asking us to walk by faith and not by sight. Something to which I only feel comfortable doing when I am in a church and not when I'm dealing with the affairs of the governance of this country. The social partnership, my friends, is also key to restoring the industrial relations climate that we have now that is spiraling out of control and threatening to further undermine confidence in this country. We must not stand back and allow a climate of intimidation of our labor leaders or members of the private sector simply because you choose to voice a disagreement with a government policy. It is wrong. And we will, as a BLP government, protect your constitutional rights to freedom of expression and freedom of association. I will say, on this current dispute with the NUPW and the government, that the government has a fundamental duty to get involved and to stop what is going on and to urgently resolve it, rather than letting these issues fester. This is a matter that is too easily to be capable of being resolved. And ironically, the Prime Minister is the Minister of Civil Service. I say no more. So, ladies and gentlemen, we recognize that key institutions in this country have to be built back up to play a key role in our development. Whether it is the police force, the central bank, or the law courts, all have regrettably fallen below par in terms of their performance in recent years. They are necessary as a check on the executive of this country. And in that regard, I will simply repeat what we've said all along. Barbados must have a commercial court so that people can resolve commercial disputes in short order and good time. The absence of that is a major problem, not just for international business, but for domestic business. And we are committed to that as one of the first orders of business in a BLP government. Only this morning I spoke to Kerry Simmons and asked him as the shadow to also look into the issue of debt tribunals, because we believe that debt tribunals may be able to deal with smaller claims that are affecting the ability of some of our domestic businesses to be able to move forward. All you have to do now is to tell a man, I am paying you, and the man says go to court, and you tell him, hey, go right ahead, because we all know the outcome. So my friends, I fear that I have entered into the territory of rollover minutes, so let me come home fast. Look, we believe in an enabling government, not an intrusive government. We believe in a government that will use technology to better enable our citizens to carry out their daily lives without spending the lines and the queues and days waiting. We believe in a government that enables those who wish to invest and grow our economy to do so without unnecessary delay and without the hindrances and uncertainties that have attached too many investments in this country. We believe in a government that enables those who wish to save hard-earned incomes to do so by supporting safe new ways to invest in the economy rather than earning nothing in a bank, and also giving people a piece of the action, especially when it comes to government-conferred contracts for the making of money in this country. We have no difficulty with government conferring contracts in the appropriate, transparent way, but carry along some Bajans with you. There cannot be the indecent consolidation of wealth that is taking place in this country. Few of these things that I've mentioned require significant amounts of new money. What they, however, require is a different approach, a focus, and a sense of responsibility. And I say to you that a part of our new governance platform will be our willingness to meet with interest groups, including the Chamber, not just to come here and speak, as I've done this year, but to come and work and listen to you in working sessions on a periodic basis so that we can remove the obstacles that are of concern to major interest groups who are both formal or non-formal in this country. Because that is the only way we will create a united platform. And we don't believe that we have a monopoly on ideas. We don't. The mission of restoring confidence in this country cannot be achieved through the efforts of any one class or any one sector or any one political party. The return of confidence cannot be guaranteed even by the economic and fiscal measures that I've mentioned here. You and I both know that the ultimate return of confidence in this country requires a political solution, the timing of which is entirely out of our hands. But the answers, nevertheless, have before us for us to recognize from now that the answers to our problems will not be easy. But they're not impossible. They're not. If we are willing to work hard enough and in the right ways together, we can do it. There will be shared sacrifice on the part of us all. Not part and not others. But just as we share in that sacrifice, we must be prepared and committed to share in the bounty and the prosperity when it returns. You can't put people on the front line of adjustment and forget them when the good times come again. We have to have a common destiny. And we must be prepared to rid ourselves of what others have described as ideological handcuffs. That's what's holding us down. We must be pragmatic while remaining loyal to our shared values as a people, which have nothing at all to do with politics, honesty, integrity, etc. Those are our values. That's about being good people. And we will have, therefore, to recognize that as we move this country forward, that's what we must remember, and the people in it. And this will take far more backbone and patience than most people realize. And we will also have, on occasion, to exercise restraint. And we will do so. We know when to lift the bat and let the ball pass outside the off stump. So the hard decisions and the risk, I say to you formally today, the Barbados Labour Party will not shirk from them. And above all else, we give you the confidence that we have the confidence and the courage to recognize that this national crisis in which we find ourselves affords us a rare opportunity, a once-in-a-generation chance to turn adversity into advantage and to rewrite the rules. In essence, we must alter our perception of ourselves and believe that nothing is beyond our capacity if we work together. If we were not in the middle of a crisis, everyone would not be listening. Let us not waste this national crisis. Happy 50th Independence, and God bless to each and every one.